We believe the purpose of owning a business is funding your perfect life. Welcome to the next generation of growth and opportunity in the inspection industry. This is the Empire State of Mind. Empire State of Mind. Helping build companies with faster growth, higher profits, and more time freedom. Finally, a podcast for the home inspection industry and beyond. This is the Empire State of Mind. And this is your host, Matt Williams.
Welcome to the show. Man, I'm glad to be back with you. I'm so glad you're tuning in for another episode. Today we have a fantastic guest with us, all the way from Orlando, Florida. I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Jt. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, I'm good, Matt. Glad to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, man, it's good. It's good. So, I know who you are. We've connected a little bit, but I actually want our guests to kind of know a little bit more about you. So Jt, how would you describe yourself? Where, like, I know you're in Orlando, but where are you located and whatnot?
Yeah, I'm pretty much an Orlando native. I've been here for 30 plus years and been in the inspection industry for 20 plus years also. So been here for a long time, seen a lot of ups and downs. We are a growing company and just looking for great people to kind of join us on our mission. And it's been a crazy ride, especially the last few years with COVID and everything. But we're just growing our team and just out there trying to, give a great product and love doing inspections.
That's fantastic. 20 years is a long time, man. That's a really long time.
It is. It's weird to say that too. Yeah, I got started.
Half your life, man.
Yeah, definitely. So I just turned 40.
Young. Yeah, how old are you?
I just turned 40 the other day. So I actually started with my dad, and I remember being a little kid running around with him to inspections, checking outlets and stuff. And I don't count those years, but officially started kind of right around high school, finishing up, and went working full time with him. And it was always just me and him for a long time. And so we did our inspections and, 2-3 a day for years and years. And he eventually got out of it. I took it over and it grew into what it is today, which we can get into later.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, it's funny. I started my own company. I got into this about 3.5 years ago now. And so April was 3 years, and
that's awesome.
So to be in the industry for 20 years, I imagine you've seen and experienced a lot. I know our audience, we have some inspectors that are fairly new to the industry, and some that have been at it for a while. So yeah, I'm really excited to kind of learn more and see what you're doing. So I know this, but you actually grown pretty quickly over the last few years. If I remember right, I think it was like in the last 4 years you've added 10 or 12 inspectors. Is that correct?
Yeah, so as of today, I just hired number 15 over the weekend.
Come on, that's awesome.
Yeah. So definitely the last few years have been a really big push for growth. I remember probably around 2019, I had a handful of inspectors, maybe about 3 or 4, including myself, and I was still out in the field doing inspections. And so, but around that 2019 mark, there was definitely some changes that I made, had growing family, made some changes with my outlook and my, just my approach to business in general. And not to mention, I've been doing inspections so long at that point, I was kind of tired of doing them, right? So I was looking for a way to get out of that. So a lot of doors were opened up to me, and we've been very, very fortunate to get some amazing people. I don't think it's all luck. I think that part of that has been trained in me as far as finding the right people to join the team, looking for certain attributes. And that's been a big part of it is to have like a really cohesive team to carry out the mission of the company, right? And I think if you look at any successful companies out there, it's the same story. Oh,
for sure. Yeah, all the time you see that. So that's interesting. So you said in 2019, so what was the shift? Like what was the thing that you said that tipped it from your mentality changing?
Yeah, I joined IAB, which, there's a lot of companies now currently in it, and they're just opening minds to different possibilities. I'm interested, from your standpoint, being so new into the industry, how things go on your side of things. But for me, I'm a technician at heart, right? Like I love doing inspections. I loved helping people go out there, make a good decision on their investment, be the person with all the answers. Like I thrive on that. And so I did it so long that I love doing it, and so it was a challenge to transition from that mindset into a business owner to where now I'm passing that off to other people to carry out. It's been an amazing change, but I don't know that I could have done it at year 3 or 5 or even year 10, right? Because I just love doing inspections so much.
Yeah, I liked being in the field. It was fun. I enjoy the people interaction side of it. I started my company, so I've owned a couple of businesses, and so I'm kind of an entrepreneur at heart, and got attracted to this industry. Back in 2018, I was kind of looking for something else to do, and I previously had owned a car lot, and I'd sold that, and then I thought, well, I could do this, and so I was looking for something that I could just do, like part-time, have something kind of a little bit more relaxed, because my last business was so high stress that I just didn't want to do that again. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to take it easy and do something simple. No employees. And then, that was my intention. And so in 2019, April 2019, we started the business and started doing it. And it was just me. And I was just kind of hanging out and doing maybe 1 or 2. And I thought, if I just do 2 or 3 a week, I'll be fine. And I don't know. So then we ended up, within a month, I was already doing 3 or 4 a week. And then by that summer, I was doing 8 or 10 a week. And then by the fall, I was doing 3 a day. And I was booked up 2 weeks or more. And I couldn't get to all the work that was coming to me within the first 6 months of it. And I was like, what is this? This is crazy. And a little bit of the right time in the right place. And also, I'm kind of a real friendly, social guy. And the typical home inspector, not all of them, of course, but the kind of the average typical is a little bit grumpy and a little bit older and a little bit this is just how it is, and because they've been around the block and they've been doing it. And I think if I'd stayed in the field for 15 or 20 years, I'd be grumpy too. And, and so, yeah, man, it was, so my take on it was, once we hit that tipping point, I had to make a decision of am I going to be the most expensive, raise my prices, be the most expensive single man inspector ever, or am I going to go to the multi-inspector model like what we're doing? And it was a lot of processing of do I really want to go back to a big company again? And so anyhow, decided to go multi-inspector, and so over 2 years we went from just me to me plus 7 guys.
Nice.
And it's been a rapid growth, and I'm not in the field anymore very much. I help on the commercial side because we do commercial inspections, and that's really about the only place that I get involved in the field is just for the bigger jobs like that. But yeah, man, it's so I don't know. I haven't been in the industry that long, and so I just pretty quickly moved out of the field just because of necessity of growth.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a trend that we're seeing, right? I think that the most successful companies have that person that's really personable, and I talk about it with my team all the time. It's if you think about anybody that you refer in your life, right? Whether it's a plumber, an AC person, a car detailer, it's somebody that you connect with and that is pleasant to deal with and that you get along with, right? Who's going to recommend somebody that they don't get along with? And so I could see why your business took off so quickly. There's a lot of people that hang on to it and just say, hey, I'm going to be in this business and hold on to it really tightly. And what we're seeing now, though, is we're seeing legitimate business owners that have never done a home inspection a day in their life get into this industry, right? And be those business owners, because it's a service-based industry. We don't have a whole lot of overhead. We've got initial tools and maybe some vehicles if that's what your company does. But other than that, we don't have all these parts and things that we have to stock up on shelves. It's a service-based industry, and so there's such huge opportunity here for business owners. And so I definitely can see why you took off so well.
Yeah, that was fun. It's been hanging on, and just finding high level talent quick enough and onboarding them fast enough and to be able to keep up with demand. I mean, it's the basics. You mentioned, though, a few minutes ago, you said something about having a system to identify that talent. Do you have a process for that?
Yeah, so I think that it's evolved over the years, right? Like even just from pre-IEB when there was no systems really in place and it was like that gut feeling kind of thing, like I think he seems like a nice guy. Let's have him here. At the core, right? Like you have to get to know somebody. And I don't think you can do that in one interview, two interviews, three interviews, right? It's got to be a multi-step process where you're catching them off guard at times. You're putting them in stressful situations, right? Because there's a lot of people that can show up really well to an interview multiple times, answer all the right questions, but it's the consistent getting to know them, letting them drop their guard, right? But I always tell people, like, we want to make sure in our company that we put the right people in the right seats, right? So having a person that doesn't like detail, that doesn't like people, that's, unfriendly, they're not going to make a good home inspector. And so you really have to flesh that out, right? Like you want to get the right people doing the right job. And just like I wouldn't put an inspector into a sales or marketing position because it's just not their forte. So it's a big learning curve, and it's something that I've taken on most of it as far as hiring goes up until just recently when we started having some leadership get more involved in it. But even then, I'm reviewing the Zoom videos, and so I'm still a big part of it. My goal, though, down the road is to have it so that I hand that off, right? And I just... Right. I don't know, like there's some big companies out there that the owners don't even know how many inspectors they have, right? And maybe that's one of my goals down the road. They're like, I don't even know, who got hired last week.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, where I'm at right now, though, I definitely enjoy it. It's not, it didn't come naturally to me. Like I'm a pretty good communicator, but the interview process is so different, but it's so critical to get right, Oh,
yeah.
I just had this experience where we had to let somebody go, and they just weren't a good fit anymore for the position, And it was a fine parting of the ways. It wasn't nasty or anything, but we just knew that wasn't the person that was going to carry us into the future, Right. And so we have to constantly be checking in with our team and making sure that everybody's on the same page. And I think too, running a good business is knowing your employees, having them feel connected to you, where they could call you in the evening and say, hey, my dog just died, right? Like I need some help here, and not being so far removed from your people to make that impossible.
Yeah, I agree. I think that company culture is important to have that relational dynamic like you're talking about. And like, to your point, people like to work with happy people, and they don't like to work with grumpy people. And that's one of we talk about that all the time in our training sessions. We have a weekly meeting, and that's like every time we're hitting a value of the company. That's one of ours is happy people like happy. People like to work with happy people, and so so we like to set the temperature or the thermostat, not the thermometer. Like we set the temperature. We like if things. I mean, think about it. People are walking into an inspection full of anxiety. Like they just walked through a house in 15 minutes and made a decision to spend a 6-figure or 7-figure amount of money in 15 minutes. With that's unbelievable that's the market we're in. But so then I can only imagine. I'm not buying a house in this market, but I could only imagine that the sleepless nights. Okay, we've got an inspection scheduled, and it's 5 days away or 3 days away or whatever it is. And so for 2 or 3, 5 days, I bet the buyer's mind is probably like imagining like what's the worst, and then they're trying to replay in their head, wait, I was only there for 15 minutes, was this here or was that there? And so people don't behave on their best behavior when they're under pressure and stress. That's not the best version of themselves. And so we're all constantly encountering not the best version of everybody. The realtors are a little on edge, the buyers are on edge, the sellers are on edge, and everybody that's involved in this is a little bit on edge. And so we've got to be that peace and confidence, right? That's one of our things, the peace and confidence in the room. We got to set the temperature. If people are getting a little bit like angry, we got to make sure we calm them down. If make sure that we're helping control that. And it's such a weird emotional ride, and you get plopped into the middle of it for like a 2-hour segment, and then we're back out again.
Yeah, I think it goes to also show what type of person you need, and the contractor that doesn't want to do contracting work anymore, it's a little rough, doesn't have the people skills. They're not going to navigate that scenario very well. And so our experience has been that I'd rather take somebody that's never done a home inspection a day in their life, but comes from a customer service background or has that pleasant attitude, right? And we can teach them how to do inspections. We have a 12-week training process. Yeah, we go through everything. I mean, I've got everything laid out in Trainual. We use Spectora for our report writing. It's very easy to train somebody, but you can't train that level of customer service. The other thing too is that, like you mentioned, there's so many different parties that have their own agendas that are involved. You've got the seller, you've got the seller's agent, you've got the buyer's agent, you've got the buyer. They all want different things too out of it, but they all want to get the house closed to some degree. But being able to be in tune with what's going on in the room is so important, right? Read the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can, because as inspectors, right, we come out, we're like, I just found termites, right? Like, look at me, I'm great, I did my job. And everybody's like, oh no, I can't believe he found it.
Yeah.
So you do have to train for that.
We're like, look what I found.
Yeah.
Everybody
found
else
polybutylene.
Like, oh. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so funny. It's true. So what are some of do you have specific qualities you're initially looking for when you're looking at a candidate? Is there
it's sad to say, but just basic communication skills, just the bare minimum, right? So we have our process where I'm not involved usually until step 2 or 3. We're at a really cool point right now with our company where we're not even soliciting we're not even have a job posting out there. We're not soliciting inspectors. People are coming to us because of our reputation, our online exposure. They just find us, right? And so I have a careers page on our website so that people that are looking for a job, maybe they just got their license or they just had a home inspection. That's a really common thing to find, is that somebody just went through a home inspection. They're watching this cool inspector do his thing. Like, man, I hate my job. I could do that. Yeah. And so they start poking around into the industry, and we get a lot of those people reaching out. So I have a funnel for them to enter. We have our process. I have our operations manager reach out to them initially. We do some, screening tools, some assessments. We use the Acumax and Acumen just to kind of get a baseline on it. Okay. And then, if they have that communication with my ops manager and she gives it the thumbs up, we have to be on the same page with them too. From are you okay with a W-2, position? Do you want to work full time? Because we get these guys that are like, hey, I only want 1099 work. I want to work part-time, and I only want to work in Orlando. I don't want to go out. I'm like, that's not going to work for us, right? We have our certain, person that we're looking for. And so screening those people out gets a lot of that out of the way. And then we start our process where we're interviewing them. We let them know about the company. We get to know them more on a very, very basic level, right? And then we dive deep into the interview process.
Wow, yeah. That sounds like you guys have quite the system in place, sir. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's helpful though, when you're talking, if we do post a job, we could get up to 20, 30 resumes pretty quickly, and so we just have to have that process. So I'm not wasting my time. Our team's not wasting their time with ride-alongs and other things. And we want to be that brand that's recognized as the biggest home inspection company in our area, right? So if you're looking for a job, come to us. I can't tell you that I'm going to take you every time or take every person, because that's not what happens. But we also like to have a bench. We want a bench of people so that in case I have a few inspectors quit for whatever reason, or somebody gets hurt and I need one, I have that built up. I have a database. I can call them back if I have a little, system in place. And so it works out really good for us. Yeah,
that's great. Yeah, I have a few. I had the same thing happening now too. Is we're actually one of the bigger companies in our area, and now, we people just call us looking for a job. And I've actually never put a job posting out.
Wow, that's awesome.
And I for about 3 months, I just literally told everybody that I knew. People ask, "How's the business?" "Oh, it's going great. I need to hire some more people. Do you know anybody that you could recommend?" And so that's all that I interviewed 45 people before I hired my first person.
Wow.
Because I just was like, no. And I have a good network in town because I've owned a few businesses, and I've just been here in Albuquerque for 30 years. So it's I just have those relational network built up. So just putting the word on the street, I'm looking for somebody. I got a ton of highly qualified candidates, but like you said, they got to be the right fit. They might be really good at one part of the job or another part of the job. And one of my initial screening points is I look for empathy and compassion is a value that I'm looking for right out of the gate. And so I'll ask, like in the first interview, I'll ask some questions, but then in there I'll have questions specifically to gauge that level, of, or I'll kind of like surprise questions kind of thing. Like we're having like an interview, and then I'll have like at the end we'll have like some kind of just regular banter and stuff. And if I see like a homeless person, or if I see somebody out there, and I'll kind of like mention it and just kind of see like what's their initial reaction, and then I'll mention other things that are kind of like, do you have any compassion or empathy for this person? And they're not in a good spot. I mean, obviously, but do you, and maybe they have their own set of issues or whatever, but do you have and so they demonstrate that compassion and empathy. That's what I'm looking for right away. And that's been like the biggest filter point for me in candidates is right there. Yeah. It's like, well, if they can't get past that, because you have to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes, buyers and sellers, and figure out how many times have like we shown up for an inspection and it's like, man, the electrical panel is shot and needs a new one, right? Something's really wrong in the electrical panel, and it's old or whatever. It has a Zinsco or something in there. So, you need a new panel. And like for me, I'm an electrician as a trade, but so for me, like that's not a big deal. But for some inspectors, they'd be like, well, that's a big deal, and it is a big deal. But you don't know what that buyer does. Like they might be an electrician. Their brother might be an electrician. And they'd be like, oh, that's no big deal for me. I'll just bring my brother over here and we knock this thing out. And so we have to assume, we can't assume anything, really. We have to assume that like their mom or their dad, their sister might own a roofing company. I mean, you just don't know. And so to make a big deal out of stuff, and so you have to be able to just be compassionate and empathetic towards everybody's situation.
Here at CFBI, we call it good bedside manner. We like inspectors with good bedside manner because I don't want somebody getting so empathetic that they're getting lost in their feelings and taking on all the feelings of others, and they're crying with somebody else. But I want them to be compassionate, right? Like be able to express remorse. Oh man, this stinks, right? Like I can understand that. But having that doctor, right, in situations where you're nervous, you're scared, and they come in and they just set the tone for how things are going to go, and they let you, calm you down. Such a big difference, right, than having that doctor that's arrogant, And so that's really a big portion. I love the idea of working that into your training. To your interview process. That's great.
I have a favorite interview question. It's not related to the empathy, compassion stuff. But one of my interview questions I always ask is like, if you could be any animal in the world, what would you be and why? And the answers that come out of that are just fascinating. Like
I bet
fascinating because you learn stuff about people. They're like, some people are like, man, I want to be a lion. It's like, why? Man, king of the jungle, and like, yeah, man, they kind of like. And now you get a glimpse into their personality in a way, like a backdoor way, I guess. I had one guy's a panda bear, and I'm like, why? Oh, they're just cute and cuddly, and like, I just want to go hug him, And I was like, okay, he's kind of a lovable guy, and different animals that come out.
Did you end up hiring him?
No, I didn't hire the panda guy. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I had one guy who's cheetah, and because he goes fast, and I'm like, I don't know. You gotta take your time on this, maybe don't rush it, And so, you kind of learn a little bit about like people's passions and desires and stuff like that. Yeah. So you got out of the field after being there for a long time. That's a hard process for a lot of people. What was that process look like for you? How long, when you just made the decision and you do this, or was it just like naturally you just had to do it?
It definitely was a process. It wasn't just like one day I'm done and I'm never going back in. So just to set the timeline on things, I started doing inspections full time around 98, 99. I took over the company in 2008 fully. So it was just me. My dad left the company and I took it over. And so it was probably, another 10 years or so really before I kind of was like, hey, I'm done doing inspections. But before then, a few years, like my wife and I got married in 2011. So I did have one inspector at that point, and I think I had one phone person in 2011, 2012, somewhere in there. And we built up the business for me and him, and we were doing good. He was off doing his own inspections. I was doing mine, and he decided to leave because he was going to move to a different state. So I was devastated, right? Like, how could you do this to us, right? Like, we built this up. And so I was scrambling at that point. I ended up finding somebody else eventually, and we trained him. He's still with me today. He's my longest term employee, team member. And, so then I got his replacement, and then the other guy ended up coming back. So he moved back to Florida and asked if he could come back on. I let him back on. And then we had hired a few more. And so it was like this slow evolving process. It wasn't like, hey, I'm going to hire 10 inspectors and figure this out.
Got it.
But yeah, for me getting out of the field, again, it was really making sure that my team could carry out what the level of quality that I wanted out of an inspection. Also, a big part of it was being able to transition my realtors, quote unquote, to them, and making the realtors feel comfortable with them showing up instead of me. And that's probably one of the biggest hurdles, I think, is getting over that mindset of like, can I let this go? Are my realtors just going to leave because I'm not there? And so, again, I think that's a process. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. It's nothing that can just shift. But yeah, it was a need too. Like, I had a family starting, kids coming, and like, I just realized like I can't do these 16-hour days because I was wearing so many hats. I had the marketing hat on. I, was writing reports. I was doing, bookkeeping, like just all this crazy stuff as we do when we're solo guys or, small teams. Like, we're just doing so much. And so offloading that stuff was such a huge game changer for me. And, again, it comes with bumps and bruises. People aren't going to do things exactly how you are going to do them. But if you train them well enough and say, hey, like, I allow you to fall forward and make mistakes, it works out better that way, and they get to learn from it. But I always tell my team, like, look, I'm okay with mistakes. Like, these are all opportunities for us to learn and get better, whether it's a customer complaint, a realtor issue, we put our foot through an attic, like whatever it is, right? Like, we have to learn from this, but don't keep making the same mistakes over.
So, when you talk about that, the realtors, like the ones that like you and want to use you and request you, right? Like, that's a real deal. And getting out of that, like, do you have any tips or tricks or anything that you did that maybe helped make that transition, or did you just be like, I'm sorry, I just can't do it, gotta send Johnny, or how do you do it?
I mean, what I did personally is I just brought them along. So it was team inspections for a while on those let's say the VIP agents, right? Like the ones that love working with you. And so we would just it would be me and James, or me and Corey, or whoever it was. And so they would get used to them. I would also push them to connect with the agents. It wouldn't just be like my assistants here. It would be my, side by side, my other inspector here, connect with the agent while I'm up in the attic or while I'm checking the outside, right? Ask them about their dogs. And so getting that comfort level was definitely really important. And it was a huge part of it to transition.
Yeah. Well, I did kind of a similar thing too. I bring people with me, and then I would then ask them, questions, and anyhow, like, I'd let them kind of go for it. But then what would happen is I would do less and less of the inspection, and then pretty soon we'd show up in two vehicles, and they would have their vehicle and I have my vehicle at the job, and then I'd let them show up, and I'd pull up 20 minutes later. And so they would pull up, like, oh, Matt's on his way. He just was, on another project, and he's coming. And so I'd show up, and he'd already be going at that point in time, have already introduced himself and started the process. And then I show up, and I kind of hang out for a few minutes, talk with everybody, and then be like, it looks like Johnny's got this one. I actually got to run to another one that I got to check in on. Do you guys have any questions for me? And no, okay. Did that a couple of 2 or 3 times, and then I just stopped showing up, because then they call in and be like, well, no, actually Matt's not available, but Johnny is, and you've had him the last few times, and they'd be like, yeah, all right, I'll take Johnny. And,
perfect.
Yeah, that's kind of how we ended up ramping off of that thing.
We have also too, we've had this experience where we have a bigger team now, and so you're going to have realtors that just gel better with certain inspectors, and so the more that you have on your team, the more opportunities you have to get the right people with the right agents. So that's been a big help.
I've got one guy who's we call him tall, dark, and handsome. And his name is Rudy, and he's like 6'4" maybe, dark hair, big beard, like big dark beard, and and he's a phenomenal inspector. But he's kind of naturally an introvert and kind of quieter. And so he shows up and he he does his thing. This is his driveway talk routine. But he just stays quiet the whole time, and then and just kind of does his whole thing. And he's like this really like gentle giant, like calming force. And and there are realtors that are like, I love this guy's energy and I want that there. And I have another guy who is like probably a party animal, like outside of work, because he's high energy and he's like super charismatic and engaging, and some people are like, this guy's awesome, it's always a party, and so it's funny how like people have different personalities, and when you have a team, you're able to now adapt, and yeah, I think that's a great point, because now when you're working in your community, it's like, man, I can now help match up the energy to provide a great experience for buyers and everybody in the room, and I think it's really good, man. That's really good. I like that point. So you've been part of IEB now for a while. You joined in 2019. IEB is the sponsor of this podcast. Most people know that based on the graphics and stuff. But I want to ask you, what has IEB done for you and your business, maybe personally and in the business? What shifts happened when you joined IEB?
Yeah, so it was a cool experience. So I had talked to Dirk, I think, in the early part of 2019, and then I just didn't sign up, right? Like, and eventually I was like, I need to do this. I kept getting emails from them or something, right? And I was like, this conversation sounds kind of interesting. So I went out to my first mastermind. It was in Houston at the time, and you got to sit down with a bunch of people, a whole room full of inspection company owners. And for, I don't know about you, but before an organization like this, that wasn't really an option, besides maybe some conferences where you've got the technicians there and they're just all single man, Nachi conference or Fabi or whatever ASHI.
Sitting down with like in your own city is difficult, because like you're sitting down with your competition. And,
exactly.
And so it's hard to have a real honest conversation with your competition that's right down the road from you, unless you have the framework. So the IEB framework. So like there's another guy in town that we're probably the top two biggest ones, and we're both part of IEB. We can have a conversation now because we have the right framework for that relationship to work with. But without that framework, how do you take your competition to coffee? Like they're trying to sniff out your like strategies and tactics and how am I going to beat them, and and it's like, no, man, that's not what this is about. But I love that.
And it's not going to be a good fit for everybody either. That's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. But for the people that have that mindset or are able to shift away from like the protection mode, right, and go into like open sharing, it's going to be a really good fit. And I'm not saying that you have to come fully like in that mindset, but if you may hear something that opens up your mind. But being in that mastermind was like, oh my God, like this is where I belong. Like this is the conversations that were happening here. Some of it was so high level that I had no clue what anybody was talking about. I was just like, this sounds really good. I don't know how to do it, and like just listening to people like Aaron Guyton and just talk about financials. I was like, I need this though, right? Like this is a big part that's missing from me. I didn't come out of school with an MBA. Like I don't know a lot of the I didn't know a lot of the business stuff right out of the gate. And so having a business type conversation, not just talking about how to do a better sewer scope or how to get more on termites, right? Like it's a different conversation. And so that was really interesting to me. I brought it back to my wife. She was like, let's join, see how it goes. It is a time commitment. We've got different meetings. I mean, it feels like they have a meeting every day if you really want to. But I slowly kind of started going to it, and then in 2020 I brought my wife to Unite, and that was our first Unite experience, and it was fantastic, right? Like, and I'll say that I am a little more reserved, and when she heard the message too, she was like, we got to do this, right? Like we got to hire, like you need an operations person, you need this, right? And it's been a really neat process getting to know people in this, in this organization, and just getting all the high level trainings that we had, that I continue to do. It's just really been life changing. I do come from like a personal growth background. So like some of the concepts around the personal side of things are not new to me, but integrating that into the business and also using it to be more open with my team about, my struggles and not being so guarded has been a huge game changer too, because it makes you feel more comfortable to open up to me if I'm opening up to you. So just changing that shift of how we're operating as a company, and our level of communication, our level of familyness, if that's a word, it's been a game changer. Anybody that has aspirations for leadership, we always send them through our GT. We try to push them into the conversation so that we're talking apples and apples. And everybody that we've done that with has been like, oh my God, I can see the vision that you're trying to cast, And so it's been a really cool process.
That's great, man. That's wonderful. Yeah, I was exposed to IEB in 2019 when I first started my company. I don't remember how now, and I found it somehow, maybe an online ad, I don't know, and then it wasn't until late 2019 when the business was growing, and they had a jumpstart program. They still do. It's like a launch. Oh shoot, is it called Launch? Yeah, okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Launch. Yeah, and it's just like a course, like a simple fee, this many weeks. And I did that launch course because I thought, well, I'm gonna like test this out a little bit, And that launch course was like, oh, this is really good. And so I implemented everything I could from the launch course. I started implementing into the business, and it changed the business so much that I was like, man, why am I not in the room? Why am I not having these conversations? If this little launch thing can help so much. And those conversations, they elevate your mentality and your mindset. And because I think the natural gravity of every business is to drag you down into the weeds of your company and the nuts and the bolts and like, how much resolution is your thermal camera? And, which, as a technician mindset out in the field, oh, this thermal camera is better than that thermal camera. Hey, you know what? You need to have good equipment. I'm not knocking it. But as the business owner, if you're consumed with that, which is so easy to get into that, how many lines of resolution your sewer scope has, is like, man, that's not the mindset of a business owner who's going to grow his company. You have to get out of that, out of the truck, out of that thing. I don't even think about that stuff anymore. I'm thinking about how do we scale this and where are the bottlenecks in our systems and processes. And IEB helps identify those things, get you in the room talking with those people, and it's always an elevated mentality. And
it's nice too because they set it up so that they don't throw you out to the wolves and put you in something that you're not ready for. Maybe it's uncomfortable, but like they have their different levels because of everybody's in a different spot, and so just to put you as a newer company, with maybe 2 inspectors and maybe 1 phone person into like an enterprise level conversation, your mind's gonna it's just gonna blow up, right? And it's not gonna be relevant. Whereas if you get with other people in that same kind of boat, or maybe a few steps ahead, that now they have a marketing team, now they have 5 inspectors, like you can learn so much from them. And I forgot to mention too, back in 2005, 06, I started a separate company. It's called Elite Mold Services, and we do mold and indoor air quality testing. And so I also had that company in place as well. Being in Florida, obviously there's tons of mold and it's done really well as a side business. But we've got 7 people over there now, and they kind of go in parallel with each other, and sometimes they kind of cross over. If we get a home inspection that has too much mold and it needs to go to an assessor, then that does that. We go over there, but it's its own separate entity. When I started the conversation with Dirk and IEB, he was like, look, with both of the companies combined, like you're kind of at that entrepreneur level, like getting close to it. And he didn't want to put me back into the level lower than that. I think it was just builder at the time. Because he's like, you're going to end up probably answering most of the questions for the builder level. But he's like, I'm going to put you out in the big waters with entrepreneur, and you're going to be asking a lot of questions there. And it was the best move for me at the time because it was super uncomfortable. I was surrounded by people that were 10 steps ahead of me, but they had answers that I needed, right? And I was able to help people in the organization or in that level that had questions that I could answer, and I was able to get a lot from the guys that have been there. So it was a really good growing opportunity for me, and it's one thing with me. I don't shy away from growth. I love I don't love not knowing things, but it definitely lights a fire under me to learn things more, and learn how to do things better. And I just got leveled up into enterprise, which is a really neat experience too. So I'm with, the biggest companies in the nation right now.
Wow.
And, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool, man. Yeah. I leveled up to when I went up through the different levels and I got up to the entrepreneur level of size of company, and now that conversation is different. And when I first started going into those conversations, I was realizing this is this is a different level of conversation that's happening. And it was like, man, things that I'm not even thinking about, these guys are talking about. And it's like, oh man, I hadn't even considered this. I hadn't even considered that. And it's like drinking from a fire hose in the beginning, right? It's just so much information. If you throw in a guy that's got 2 or 3 inspectors into the conversation of people that have, 4 cities in 3 states, and the challenges that those companies are facing are just radically different. And you got to have somebody. If they're so far ahead of you, you can't even see them, then you're not really going to learn much. They got to be close enough that you can see them. And I love how they categorize it that way. That way, no matter what size of company you're in, it definitely puts you in the right room with the right people in the right conversation. And they're pretty quick to recognize. Hey, this guy's, it might be time for him to consider moving up, or if you feel like you're in the room and you're the guy answering all the questions for everybody else, then it's like, yeah, it's probably time to move up. And they're pretty good about getting you into the right fit and helping you continue your growth.
Yeah, I think that too, the overarching spirit of IAB is giving back, right? Like, I think that runs through the veins of the people that do really well here. And so again, if you're really closed off, it's going to be tougher. You can take, right? But I think that if you have any experience with helping others in whatever capacity that is, right? Like, you get so much more out of it.
Yep.
And so it's definitely, I would say, 75% giving and helping as much as possible with 25% taking, and it's just going to be a better ratio like that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why we started this podcast, actually. So I actually had another podcast personally that I was getting ready to launch, and Mark Hummel and I were talking about that. That came up somehow in a conversation, and he was like, "Man, I've always wanted to start a podcast with IAB," and that's how this thing got started. And I was like, "Oh man, I would love to. Like, can you help out? Can you give us some advice?" We were talking, and eventually he's like, "Can you just do it?" And I was like, "Man, sure, I'd love to." So I put my other project on the shelf, and I was like, "What I'm going to do is I'm going to really focus on this." And he's like, "What do you think it would cost?" I'm not sure. I was like for the equipment, I already have the equipment. And he's like, "No, I mean, like," I was like, "Oh man, I do this for free, because the IAB has poured into me so much over the last couple of years, and I've seen it's changed my life in such a massive way that I want to give back." And there's that spirit that's all the way through the entire thing. Everybody is in there, and they're paying their dues and financially, but they're also giving back. And people are leading pods, and they're leading like smaller groups of discussions, and they're leading larger group discussions. And everybody is so willing to pour their time and energy and effort into the community that that's what makes it work. And so if you show up at IAB, at first you might be like, I'm gonna kind of figure out my bearings, but it's gonna come up pretty quickly. You realize I have something to contribute. I got something that I can put into the mix here that I know is gonna add some value. And when you start giving, that's when you really start getting more. It becomes a very valuable community. The more you give.
Yeah, and the only way that you're really able to do that, right, is by having that extra time or that extra margin in your schedule. The guy that's doing 3 inspections a day doesn't have that opportunity to give back. If that's where they're at and they're happy, that's great. But if you want this kind of other side of things, you have to be able to have that margin in your life to be able to give back, and that's only going to come from saying, "Hey, I can't do this," or exercising the no muscle. I'm like, "No, I can't do this," right? And so that's definitely been something that has taken some work, being able to say, "No, I can't do this now." But it's been so rewarding.
Yeah, man, that's good. Like whenever you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And so if you're saying yes to that 3rd inspection a day, then you're saying no. What are you saying no to? And sometimes you don't even know what you're saying no to, because your margin is gone and you don't even have the opportunity to consider what could be in that space. And I like in the beginning days when I was really cranking them out in the field, I was saying yes to inspections, and ultimately I was saying no to my family at home because I wasn't spending quality time with them. And that took its toll, and I we had to work through that and get out of that. But how are you going to be able to give to others if you are so busy working and have zero margin in your life? And I've had the privilege to be able to go to a lot of funerals, and I've never heard anybody talk about how many square feet that person's house was. They never talk about what kind of investments they had. They don't talk about. What they talk about is the amount of impact and generosity they had in changing the lives of other people And like our legacy is going to be wrapped up in the people that we've invested in, that are behind us. And man, the earlier you start that, the better it's going to be. And we work so hard for things that ultimately don't really matter. Is that extra 1,000 square feet in your house going to change your life? Is that Lamborghini? Well, actually, that Lamborghini might change my life. But I don't have a Lamborghini, but is it really going to change your life that much? I don't know. It's a fun thing. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you're getting that at the expense of not investing in other people and not giving and not being generous, that generosity towards others is what unlocks a really fulfilling life.
Yeah. And, time is obviously a precious resource. And, this moment right now is never going to happen again, right? So if I'm sitting with my kids, I want to be there present with my kids. I can't say I get it perfect all the time. I'm not up on a high horse, right? Like I've got my mobile phone that I'm playing with, my iPhone, there's definitely, but like keeping that in mind is so important, because especially as business owners, right, we can get wrapped up in wanting to grow the business or wanting to hire this next inspector. But at what cost is it costing? Is it my kid, asking, hey, I want to play with you? And it's no, not right now. I can't do it. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind. And I've heard it said before, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And so, making sure that what we're saying yes to, it's an emphatic yes, right? Like I want this and I want to do it. And if not, it's a no. Sorry, I can't do it, but maybe I know somebody that can. And then going back to the Mark Hummel conversation, I think of the book Who Not How, right? Like he found his who for the podcast, and so you're his who. Exactly. And so he's able to carry out his vision of doing a podcast with your assistance. This is your zone of genius, and it's so much easier than him trying to get all this equipment and trying to figure out the software and just this is what you like doing, right? So it makes it joyful for you too.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say zone of genius, but zone of availability.
Maybe one day.
Maybe I'm available, So,
there you go.
Yeah, so willing to commit, I guess. Yeah, gotcha. Eventually, right? If we do enough of these, I might become a podcast genius. But for now, I'm a podcast entrepreneur trying to figure this thing out. Man, I think this is a great spot to end it, because just understanding that this whole generosity idea of like, man, let's go live lives that are generous, that are giving, that are and find fulfillment in life. And I mean, that if you don't take anything else from this podcast episode, I think that's it, man. That's the key moving forward. JT, I've just really loved having you, and I hope our guests and audience learned something today, and I hope that they walk out inspired by you and your story and kind of everything that we discussed today, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's been a great conversation. If anybody wants to get a hold of me too, you can visit our websites for the different companies. So Central Florida Building Inspectors, the website's cfbinspect.com. My mold company is Elite Mold Services. It's moldinspect.org. I've got links for emails there. You guys can always reach out, and I'm sure you're going to put some notes in the podcast notes for reaching me. But again, going with that generosity theme, anybody listening to this that wants to chat, has some questions, I'm always available for it. Email's probably the best, just so that my phone's not blowing up, and I'll definitely get back to you.
Yep, we're going to have all that contact info in the show notes. If you want to get in contact with JT and maybe continue the conversation, or if you live in Orlando and you're looking to become a home inspector, I heard he might be hiring. That's word on the street.
I always tell people I'm always hiring.
Always hiring.
Always
That's
looking
awesome.
for good talent.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful day.
You've been listening to Empire State of Mind for the home inspection industry and beyond. Our passion is to elevate the home inspection industry with mindset, strategy, and tools. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. For more, follow on Instagram at IEB Coaching. And don't forget to hit the website at www.iebcoaching.com. Learn about IEB at no cost and have all your questions answered on our open call once a month on the third week of the month. We hope to see you there, and we'll see you next time on the Empire State of Mind.